Elrentaros Wanderings is an action RPG with a heavy emphasis on both dungeon crawling and relationship building. It was developed and produced by a team with some incredible talent that has previously worked on Rune Factory, Pokemon, and the Ease games. I mention this because it really shows that you had a talented, experienced team behind this. This is a game that will take you on a journey of discovery as you seek to find the truth behind a mysterious mirror while traveling between worlds. But before we get started, if you're new here, please consider subscribing to help me reach my current goal of 1,000 subscribers. At first glance, the very first thing that immediately caught my attention is the character art. It's beautifully drawn. Every single character is expressive and unique from all the rest, which leads us to the next thing I really enjoyed, the dialogue between the protagonist and the rest of the citizens of the town. Each and every character has a unique personality and dialogue as they interact with you throughout your journey. How much time you spend during these lengthy dialogue sequences is entirely up to you. If you enjoy the story and these interactions as much as I did, you'll want to talk to everyone and complete all of their missions. Try to increase your likability with each person, and you'll be treated to some events where you spend some extra time interacting with them. It's a huge part of the game, and although I'm not going to be showing a lot of footage of it, just know that you can put as much or as little time into this aspect of the game as you want. You can completely skip talking altogether if you just want to enjoy the gameplay, or you can savor every moment you spend increasing your bond with the entire town. When you first start up the game, you have your choice between a male or female protagonist. I played as a male. I'm not sure if there's any differences in the interactions depending on which you choose, but with the way the dialogue is written, I'm inclined to think that there's not. A few of the town's citizens run shops that you can purchase equipment from, but for the most part, this aspect is something you probably won't use often, since the gear you acquire from dungeons is far superior to that which can be purchased. By default, these characters do have voice acting, but it's strictly in Japanese. There are no English voices.
はじめさんと誰？
If you would rather turn that off and find it distracting since you don't understand the language, no worries, the option is there. I can't emphasize enough just how much I enjoyed the interactions with all the characters throughout the game, and just how many of them there are. It's rare for a dialogue-heavy game to capture and keep my attention throughout the duration of its runtime and beyond, but this one certainly succeeded in doing so. There's optional missions you can complete during dungeons which reward you with items the specific character is seeking, which will often yield magical rewards and increase your likability with the characters tied to the mission giver. Another way you can increase likability is by gifting a character's favorite items, which can be purchased with gold tokens earned during missions, or by planting crops in 3 plots just outside the perimeter of the town. Harvesting these crops when they've fully grown yields additional gold tokens. Providing certain characters with the appropriate amount of gold tokens will yield alliance buffs, with each character having their own unique set to offer you. Only one can be equipped at a time, so it adds a great bit of customization to your build, but we'll dive into that more once we talk about the combat and equipment systems. The last thing I want to mention before jumping into the other aspects of the game is that the story will take you on quite the ride. It's filled with twists and turns, mystery, uncovering secrets, and truths behind the two worlds and how they intertwine. I enjoyed seeing it through to the end, and found its conclusion to be both fulfilling and a satisfying end to the journey. But the road doesn't stop there. When you finish the game, you can continue playing if you have loose ends to tie up, and you can even start over in what is essentially New Game Plus. Now, as far as the equipment systems go, there are 4 main types of weapons that you can acquire, like swords and fists, and axes and spears. There's also different rarities of each of these 4 main weapon types. There's normal, there's special, and then there's legendary equipment. Each of these pieces of equipment for both your weapons and your armor also have these stars. Now, the stars are called Awakening, and what you can do is you can use some of your gold to purchase different buffs that are supplied for each weapon, and each one will take up a certain number of stars. So if you have 3 stars, you might use 3 different buffs that use a star apiece, or maybe one that uses 2 stars and another that uses 1. It adds some customization to your equipment, and that's for both weapons and armor. As far as the armor goes, there's a ton of different types of armor, but you can only equip one piece at a time. So you can't wear like a helmet, a chest piece, leggings, and then greaves or something like that. It's just one piece of armor that you'll equip. And they boost different aspects of your character, so maybe depending on what type of weapon you're using, if you're using a sword, you might want to use, this piece of armor. But then if you get a good katana, you might want to switch to a different piece that buffs the katana in different ways. And your weapons will eventually have status effects. It's mostly on the legendaries, but you might have things like poison or dark or fire. And all of this really allows you to customize the game and the combat to your liking. Now, fighting the different types of enemies is basically like hack and slash. You can roll to dodge, and you'll have different magical abilities that you can equip. There's quite a bit of different types of enemies and bosses for each biome, which there are different biomes, and then each biome has different dungeons within it. Some might be level 12, and then level 16, and then 20, and then you might go on to the next biome, but then eventually you'll come back and it'll have a higher level dungeon for you to tackle. And the gear that you acquire is usually indicative of what you'll need to go up to the next level dungeon. Some of the enemies are really fun to fight. There's a good bit of variety across them, and learning kind of their attack patterns and their strengths and weaknesses will ensure that you come out victorious in combat. Now, each biome also has bosses. Some of these you'll fight more than once, most 2 or 3 times at least before the end of your adventure. All of them are pretty fun, honestly. I can't really think of one that I didn't enjoy. Some are really nothing special, but were still fun to overcome. Now let's talk briefly about maybe some of the issues that I had with the game and things that either weren't explained or I just kind of really didn't like. And the first is that death and quitting in the middle of a dungeon both result in lost dungeon progress. So if you're on floor 8 of a 10-floor dungeon and you die, you will respawn back in the town, and nothing that you acquired will be with you. So that was lost progress, lost time. The same thing goes for quitting out of a dungeon. Now, you can quit out of the dungeon if you want to, but again, you're going to lose your progress, and this isn't explained, so just understand that you will lose progress if you die or you quit out of the dungeon and return to the town. Another thing I wasn't really crazy about is sometimes it's not really clear what you need to do to progress the story. And in these moments, you'll probably be a bit confused because you completed all of the available dungeons that you have, and there's nothing new for you to tackle. So what I would typically do is I would go back and revisit a dungeon I've already cleared and try to clear missions that I hadn't finished yet, and then turn those into the NPCs in the town. And then eventually, after usually sleeping overnight or an event that happened in the town, I would be able to progress further. I think these are tied to a certain NPC. I didn't understand or fully realize that towards the end of the game, and I'm not even positive that that's the case. But if you play this and you're kind of stuck, just finish some extra missions. There's one NPC in particular that I think you'll know who it is. Pretty sure the story missions are tied to them. But again, this isn't explained, so it's a bit cryptic in that regard. The last thing I wasn't really crazy about, and this is really kind of late game, is that there is some slowdown. There's times where you use an ability that has an elemental effect or a wide range of attack, and you hit a whole bunch of enemies at once. And there's more enemies on screen late game than there is early game, so this wasn't really an issue. And there's some slowdown. I mean, the Nintendo Switch is pretty old at this point. This type of stuff is to be expected. It doesn't ruin the experience, it's just a minor annoyance. It's over just as quickly as it starts, but did want to note that there is some slowdown. With all that said though, Elrentaros Wanderings was an absolute joy to play through. I was quite fond of all the different characters, and building relationships with them was satisfying. I adored the presentation of the game with its colorful art design, charming illustrations, well-written dialogue, and catchy soundtrack. I found the combat to be fun as a result of trying out the different weapon types and magical abilities. The variety in enemies and bosses was wide enough to keep it feeling enjoyable, even though some of the reused level layouts is a bit repetitive, which for some might be more of an issue than it was for me. Some of the level designs being reused was the main downside to the dungeon crawling, but I found this easy to look past and enjoyed earning new loot and had fun creating builds using the different weapon types. The story unfolded at a nice pace and had some twists and turns throughout to keep me interested as I wondered where it was going to head next. I actually had so much fun playing this that after rolling the end credits, I jumped right back in to finish off the rest of my character-related missions. If that's not enough to convince you of my glowing recommendation for this game and why you should play it for yourself, then I'm not sure anything else I could possibly say will convince you. This, to me, was an absolute must-play that I can easily recommend to players of all skill levels since it has 3 varying difficulty levels to ensure no one gets excluded, whether you're an expert or a novice in action RPGs. If you absolutely hate repetition and think the core gameplay loop of dungeon crawling, then interacting in the town, and repeating this throughout would be boring, then I guess I'd say for you, give it a pass. But for everyone else, this one is worth your time, and you should absolutely play it if you think you'd have fun with what I described in great detail throughout this review. I appreciate you watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and also let me know in the comments if you plan on picking this up, what you thought if you've already played it, or if you have any questions, and I'll be sure to get back to you. But until next time, have a good one.